Good morning and welcome to the June 16th OGKC monthly meeting. We're happy that you're able to join us. I'm Brenda Dewberry, co-president of the organization. Joining us is Ron Browner, board president, and Barbara Turpin. We welcome you to today's event. We're asking you to put your name in the email or the chat to be eligible to your name and email, in the chat to be eligible to win a $50 gift certificate. Our next meeting will be August the 18th, and the presentation will be on consumer scams. If you're interested in having a certificate for your attendance today, please submit your name to Barbara Turpin in the chat if you would like a certificate. It is my pleasure to introduce our guest speaker for today. Our guest speaker for today is Miss Mattie White. Miss Mattie White has a community service and activism member has had a large part of community involvement. She began assisting African Americans in registering to vote while in high school. Mattie joined the Future Teachers of America Club in high school and began her teaching experience as a Sunday school teacher at 16 years old. The spirit of service began at a young age and continues to be present. Mattie was the Even Start Family Literacy Coordinator for the Dayton Public Schools and was instrumental in establishing literacy sites in the four quadrants, of the city. Her employment experiences include family and community involvement coordinator, social studies teachers, intervention specialist, junior and senior high school principal. One of Mattie's most rewarding experiences have been assisting with voter registration conducted by the League of Women Voters, of the Greater Dayton area at immigration and naturalization ceremonies. She was awarded the League of Women Voters Dangerous Dame Award in March 2024 for her commitment to the preservation of democracy. She is committed to justice, equality, and empowerment for all, particularly those who are marginalized and disenfranchised. She believes that it's important to let her light shine so that men may see the good work and glorify the Father, which is in heaven. At this time, please welcome Mattie White. Thank you.
Well, good morning, and thank you for that introduction. I do appreciate the opportunity to be here to share with you this morning. And as we start our sharing, I'd like to know who's in the space. So if you could just turn your camera on a little bit and tell me your connection with Ohio Grandparent and Kinship Coalition. Thank you. That's very helpful. Ms. Rosalind, we'll go ahead and start with you. What's your connection?
I'm a kinship care grandmother. I have custody of my grandchildren.
Okay. Ms. Rutona?
Yes, my husband and I have guardianship of 3 grandchildren. We've had them for 5 years now.
Okay, understood. Are there any others? Thank you. Demetriakis, okay. Is that Demetriakis?
Yeah, Bill Demetrakis. My wife and I have legal custody of our just turned 12-year-old grandson because my daughter and the baby daddy, after he was born perfect, became 3 weeks after he was born, became heroin addicts. Why I don't know that, but so it's been a decade plus long battle.
There any others that would like to share? Just jump in. Okay. Well, we will move into today's presentation. And one thing for sure is that we all have in common is that at some point in time in our lives, we've had to care for others extended to us. And today we're going to talk about something that can be very daunting and complex, but it can be extremely rewarding when we think in terms of the outcomes for children and families. Today's presentation is on the IEP. Can you unmute and tell me, what does the IEP mean? What does it stand for? And just take a stab of it. We're in a safe space, and we're all learning here together today, because I am definitely anticipating
Does
some questions
IEP
and some
mean?
input. What is it? I'm sorry, did someone say, what does it stand for, IEP?
I know is it Independent Educational Program?
You are almost there, and that is independent. It should be, because that's the ultimate goal, is to help our young people lead a life of independency to the degree possible within their capacity. But actually, legally, it's individualized education program, and it is for children with disabilities, those who have been determined based on a diagnosis or diagnoses, or it's been determined prior to, after going into the school system. So let me share with you, what is an IEP? It's a written document that operates like a contract between you and the school district. We're working on providing information, goals, or plans specific to the student's disability and that student's need. It outlines what services, support, and accommodations that the child will receive. It's it is legally supposed to summarize in detail the student's special education plan. And let me pause at this point. When we say special education, please be reminded of the fact, and sometimes we have to remind our partners in the school system, that special education is not a place, it is not down the hall. They may go down the hall because that's the least restricted environment in order for them to receive special education services. But special education is comprised of instruction, support services, it could be transportation, etc., to our children. The Individualized Education Program, or IEP, was set in place by IDEA. IDEA. And IDEA, Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, is a federal law that requires public schools in every state and the U.S. territories to identify, evaluate, and provide programs for students who meet the eligibility criteria. It was enacted by Congress in 1975. So what you have is a document of provisions that can be contested in court. Let me say that again. It's a legal document. Sometimes we are not mindful of that, as well as educators. And I'm going to say this too. When we talk about the IEP, and I'll talk a little bit more as we get through the presentation, how important it is to partner with school personnel to ensure that the IEP is effective and that the IEP provides FAPE, FAPE, and that's free, appropriate public education. Now, when you go into the school districts and you start saying, like, I want to ensure that FAPE is achieved, some of the school personnel, they're going to look at you, because in some instances, you're going to know more about the IEP process than them. And this is not a slight to the schools. It's based on the conditions that we're in now. Some school districts are not fortunate enough to be able to have licensed intervention specialists working the IEP process and providing special education. And it's because we have, quite frankly, a shortage of education. And then, of course, when you think in terms of specialties within the disciplines, we have even a greater shortage. Now, that is not a rationale, but not for providing for children what they need. So together, collaboration and partnership are going to be key. The goal of an IEP is to have a developed, well-crafted plan that provides effective instruction in an environment that will help the child to be able to thrive in school and in life. And to reach that goal, as I said, it's going to take a collaborative approach between parents or guardians, educators, advocates, and the community, all who are working in the best interest of the child or the children. Reaching the goal can be a challenge, as I said, because of the responsibilities that each group has in the process. Sometimes families think that, well, I'm going to trust the school, and we should trust each other, but we don't leave it to each entity. The school should be communicating with the families should be communicating with the schools. It is a responsibility, and I'm sure some of you all that are here in this meeting space today probably already realize how daunting it can be to one, navigate the process, weed through the paperwork, continue to monitor and review, and then to make sure that you're getting the updates that you need so that you, and let me say this also too, what can be a challenge, having your input heard and appreciated. So that's why a collaborative process is important. It's important to prevent students from also adopting a position of learned helplessness. When children are in settings, they become frustrated because they're in an environment where they're not provided the accommodations or modifications to be able to help them matriculate or become educated in the curriculum. It can be very frustrating. And let me just say that simply. You're in a classroom and you're taking a spelling test. But spelling may be a learning disability for you. No one's assisting you. Well, first of all, you've not even been identified as having had that learning disability. And then secondly, there's no help or support. It could be that maybe you're slightly dyslexic. Now we got something, a foundation for the learning disability that helps you're seeing the letters switched up. Or perhaps maybe you just didn't get that phonetical foundation to be able to sound letters out and be able to match letters with what you see. Just imagine the frustration that that will cause. Now I'm frustrated, I'm going to act out. So now it becomes a behavior problem. And when we think in terms of identification, we have to be sure and clear. That's why it's important for parents to know what's going on with what their students are studying, how it's being taught. Because is it the learning disability or is it the behavior that becomes a disability? Or is it concomitant, meaning they're accompanying? And sometimes in schools, there's a focus on one, but not necessarily get to the root of what the issue is that's causing the concomitant or the accompanying disabilities. So children can develop what's called learned helplessness also, which, is like, it's a lack of self-efficacy, a lack of believing that you can. So we want to make sure that we start early with prevention and intervention to make sure that our children, one, have great self-esteem and feel good about what they can do. We always want to assume competence and help our young people to assume competence. Now, let me stop because there's a lot I'm going to be sharing and I don't want to be a talking head. So I'm going to pause. And at any point in time you want me to pause or you have a question, just indicate to me and come in. So where are we right now with what I have said? We all understand what an IEP is, an individualized education plan. It should be specific to the child's needs and the child's disability.
Ms. White, in discussing this, you mentioned that it happens after the child gets involved with the educational system. So once they start into school, at what point does that child get evaluated or recognize that they may have those educational barriers and issues that you're describing? How does that part of that process happen, or when does it happen?
So let me correct something that it seems like I have said. The process can begin when a child starts school. The IEP begins at school age, kindergarten, first grade. But there is a preschool intervention plan that occurs because a parent can enter a child into the preschool program with knowledge of the fact that the child is going to be able to need some support. There may be some lagging skills. So your question, at what point, it could be identified by our teacher, it can be identified by the parent, it can be identified by another support personnel in the school, such as an OT, occupational therapist. And let's just say, I'm going to walk you through how it gets started. But let's say the parent in kindergarten says, my child doesn't seem to be grasping these skills. My child's grades reflect that there is a lag. So they say to the teacher, I'm concerned. I would like to have my child evaluated. And then that's when the teacher would say, well, sign a consent form, giving the school personnel, the school district, the permission to evaluate. And I'm going to go through, what that looks like, because actually it is the ETR, the evaluation team report, that sets the stage, and that is the foundation for the IEP. It is the ETR that determines whether or not the child is eligible or meets the criteria for a disability. Now, the categories of disability include intellectual disability. I'm sorry, I have to get my glasses. I have my glasses on, but I switch up. It includes intellectual disabilities, hearing impairments, including deafness, because there are degrees and variances in that, speech or language impairments. Sometimes we have to be careful with that because school personnel will say, well, they're sounding out okay. I don't hear any issues with articulation, but speech impairment can also impact reading. There's visual impairments, including blindness. And blindness, there are degrees of visual impairments also. There's serious emotional disturbance, which is mostly referred to as emotional disorder. Then there is orthopedic impairment. Well, let me back up to serious emotional disturbance, because the statistics say that there's a higher percentage of boys that are identified. Now there's a growing number of girls who identified with emotional disturbance. And I will say that given that we have gone through COVID and that there are issues in our society, we're seeing more and more of that. The trauma that children are experiencing is causing problems with, I won't say problems, it's causing some challenges with emotional stability. Then I said orthopedic impairment. There's autism. There's a rising level of diagnosis of autism. It used to be that it was pervasive developmental delay, autistic categories or eligibility, and then Asperger's. But now it's all been put under one umbrella of autism. And there is a range or a degree of how one is affected or described with the characteristics of autism. Then there's traumatic brain injury. One thing about traumatic brain injury is that I'd like to share is that traumatic brain injury sometimes results in emotional disorders. And I think we tend to forget that as family members and also in the school personnel. If a child has had issues with head blows, falling out of the bed, falling, off the bike or what have you, sometimes they're brain concussions and we don't know about it. And I always caution and encourage parents, if a child takes a severe fall, have that child checked out by a medical provider, because concussions are real. And sometimes when they're in young children, and they are not identified and or treated, it can relate to traumatic brain disorder. And there are other health impairments. We see ADHD classified on the OHI of a health impairment. And that is because ADHD can adversely affect the child's learning. And so for that reason, we want to make sure that when we get a diagnosis or the school says, well, they don't qualify for an IEP, perhaps maybe a 504. And a 504, that is a good thing because it provides for some accommodations. But if there's severity with regards to ADHD, then we want to make sure that there's an IEP so that the conditions, I want to say the symptoms do not negatively impact the child's learning. I am so sorry. Everybody wants to call me today. And I'm going to turn this phone off now. I'll take a breather here because, as I said, there's a lot of talking today and at any point in time. So we've talked about the categories of an IEP. Then there's the specific learning disabilities, which are lumped into reading, writing, math. A child could have dyscalculia, which is the inability to be able to do math in a way that allows them to be functional. And then, of course, writing. We forget that sometimes that is a disability and it can affect other areas. If they can't read what they write or decode what they write, then we get a domino effect. So we've talked about that, and I'd like to, at this point in time, go to the forms. And as we go to the forms, I will share with you that your IEP team should consist of required members, and that's required by law. You, of course, the parent or the guardian, you're the significant member. And Katie, you can bring up as I'm talking, you can go ahead and bring up the forms. So there should be the parent.
Yes, I'm sorry. I'm bringing them up right now. They weren't in the right placement when I tried to do it before.
Oh, okay. No worries. No worries. The parent, the IEP team, the parent, and at least one regular education teacher, a special education teachers or / intervention specialist, depending on what district, what they're called, what state. There should be a representative of the school district from the district level. It should be the administrator for the office or department of exceptional children or special education division or a designee, or it can be the school principal, or if that school principal has another administrative person in the building, they can be the principal's designee. It should be someone who is able to interpret the instructional implications of the evaluation results, someone who can take that evaluation report and share the results of it in a way that all members will understand what it means, because you're going to be looking for the baseline, the present levels of performance, and et cetera, that I'll go through. And so generally, that's your school psychologist. But in some instances, it can be your educational consultant, depending on the title and the function and the role. But when you're at the meetings, remember that you should look for and ask who's around the table, who's here. And then if someone is not there, you should have been asked to sign a waiver excusing that person for the reason given. So is it anyone here in this meeting space that has to interact with an IEP and attend IEP meetings that have ever been given an opportunity to excuse a member from the team? No? Have you gone to a meeting and there were just you and someone else? Yes, Laverne.
Okay, I have been to IEP. First of all, I like to say a couple things. My grandson, he got his first IEP going into preschool. So he's had an IEP since there. I thank you guys, because the very first time I was on a conference like this, a Zoom meeting on the IEP, I learned I'm the #1 person that's important in that meeting. I'm the one that makes things happen. With that being said, also the IEPs, they do give us a Southwestern School District in Columbus here, gives us a letter, a copy of the IEP, and that's where they put in if someone is excused or not, and then we agree to that. I don't get one prior to, but that. Another thing I like to say to everybody on here is my grandson's 14. He's going to go into high school next year. And with me and his counselor therapist from Nationwide, we are going to have him into the IEP so he knows more about it going into high school. Thank you.
That's fantastic. And I was going to say that when it is appropriate, please make sure that you include the child so that they will know what is being said about them first and foremost, and then that their input is going to be considered and included in the IEP. And then they can learn to advocate for themselves. That is first and most important. They learn advocacy. And she talked about her child being 14. That is the age where there should be the beginning or the development of a transition plan that is a part of the IEP. So she's correct that the parent is the first and most important person on the team. I said that there should be a regular education person, a special education person, and then also there should be someone who can interpret the instructional implications from the evaluation. That's generally the psychologist. And then anyone that the parent of school believes that deems to have expertise about the child. And in Miss Laverne's case, it was the counselor from Nationwide who also has significant input that would be able to be a part of the IEP. And then, of course, we just stated the child themselves. All right, so we're ready to do screen sharing. Now, let's dig into the IEP. So the first thing before there's an IEP, and Miss Laverne and anyone else can chime in, you had to have what's called an ETR. The ETR is the evaluation team report. So Miss Laverne knew that in preschool, that her child was going to need some anchors, some support to be able to learn the general education curriculum and to be able to master skills. However, sometimes there are situations where children will need, the goal is to be able to learn the general education curriculum per grade level as the same as their peers. So, or we notice that, let's say the child's already in school, has gotten to third or fourth grade, and we see that there are some challenges that need to be addressed. So the first thing we're going to do is require a referral for evaluation. It can come from the parent, it can come from the school. And you see this form where, here's the basic, the referral, and the reason for the referral. I don't know if that form can be moved up or not, but yes, the reason for the referral is very key and significant. And then you're going to talk about, some data, whoever's completing this form, and parents, you can ask the school personnel to help you, to work with you, and you sit down and do this referral. And this referral is supposed to be dealt with and addressed. Okay. Thank you. And we appreciate you. And so hopefully, Mr. William Dimitrakis, that this information can be retrieved for you. So let's go to the second page. Keep going. We're going to keep going down. Okay, so here's the referral evaluation. What do you think the suspected issue is? And you see some examples of that. Let's keep going. And there's some environmental factors that we're gonna here. For preschool, you see what's happening here. What you see is academic as well as functional skills that may be areas of concern. Is the child not eating properly? Can be an indication of fine motor skills issues that need to be attended to. Cognitive is certainly, is their ability to comprehend information, to retrieve information, and to apply information. Social and emotional, the child cannot self-regulate as typical peers or as expected per age and setting. So therefore, we need to see, is there a need for therapy, or is there a need for an environment that is addressing sensorial issues? Sometimes some children respond behaviorally because it's an issue with the environment. And school educators oftentimes mean well, but there's so much to be done in school and to attend to, with all of the mandates coming by. they may not necessarily realize that the sensories in the room may be having a negative impact on a child. So we'll keep going down. We're going to follow these. So you're going to sign and give a consent for your child to be evaluated. That is first and foremost. You have the opportunity to refuse consent if the referral came from someone other than yourself and you don't think that this is necessary. We just keep going, Katie. Yes. So then the school is going to share with you whether or not your consent is going to be honored, and it will be done. So now we're getting into the evaluation team report. Let's just say this is an initial evaluation. This is the beginning. We're starting from ground floor. And notice you see reevaluation is after the IEP has been developed. The child is receiving special education services. Every 3 years, this evaluation must be completed. That's law. It can be completed in totality, or sometimes schools will say, we'll do a records review. If there's a records review, I caution you parents to please make sure that you have documentations that show this child is either mastering the goal and the skill or not, and that the records review are clear and that it's not cookie cutter or rubber stamped. So here again, you can see what you need to do. And if I'm being redundant for people who already have this information, please forgive me. Just give me a thumbs up and we'll move more clearly. Can someone monitor the chat, because it's a little difficult for me to speak and also see what's going on to respond.
I'm going to track it, Ms. White.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So you see the status. After everything's been done, these are the parts that must be done in order for this ETR to be complete. One, you got to have individual evaluators assessment. That's the teachers, that's the gym teacher, that's the reading teacher. That is across the board evaluators, you know, the instructions, and if it's a paraprofessional, it's a good to have their information because sometimes they hone in more closely with children. The team summary is at the end of all of this paperwork. What does the team say? Is there an eligibility that has been determined? Then documentation of existence of specific learning disability. If there is something that's happening academically in the areas of reading, writing, and math, you've got to have that documented. And then, of course, part 4 is going to tell us there is an eligibility, there is not an eligibility. If there is an eligibility, what's the category? Yes, please keep going. And then, of course, it isn't legal unless all the signatures are in place. This is a school age evaluation form, okay? So we start here, the planning. You're gonna get called to a meeting. They will say, Ms. Switano, we have received your request for evaluation. You've given consent. So there's gonna be a planning meeting. So you'll get a notice. I think it's a PRO2, maybe PRO 102. And they're gonna say, on this date, we're gonna come together and we're gonna talk about, this is an initial evaluation. Oh, okay, so in this planning session, the data that's going to be reviewed is we've got information from the parent. So you set who's going to provide this information. The parent is going to give us information. Who's going to give us the general intelligence information? It could be the psychologist. Who's going to give us information about the academic skills? The regular education teachers. Classroom-based evaluation in progress. What interventions have been done prior to the evaluation? So that's an important part that I didn't include. When there's a problem that's noticed, intervention should go into place. We should go in intervention mode in the home. You can stop right there for a moment. In the home and in the school. And so because that data is going to be important to us, the interventions may resolve the matter, or we need to know whether or not no interventions have been applied. Because one of the things that we check in the IEP is whether or not this child's diagnosis or issues are because of poor instruction. And that is so key. And so here again, is there a suspected disability in the area of vision, hearing? And you see on down the line, has there been a physical exam? You may want your doctor to provide some information. It could be the school nurse also that will give some data on vision, because all kindergartners and early learning students up to third grade should have their vision checked by the school and their hearing. But please know that you can have independent evaluation done by providers that you deem to be knowledgeable of your student or your child's care. Then, of course, when we talk about vocational transition, is that an area? Then we need to talk about the background history. And this is where, as caregivers, you're going to provide, information that's relevant. As someone said that their child may have been substance abuse impacted. That's really key and should be included. Not, and when you include information like this, let's make sure that you make it known that you're including this information as a factor to be considered in the care and the instruction provided for your child, not to be judged, not for this child to be determined, oh, well, they can't learn because of this happened. Oh, well, there's situations. We're not judging anyone. We're looking at the whole child, because this is about the child and what is in the best interest of the child. Then, of course, depending on what your suspect, if the child is obvious, it will be obvious if there's a need for Braille. I say it will be obvious, but let's not assume that, because there are degrees of blindness and degrees of deafness. And if there's a need for audiological or communicative aids for children's speech assistance, we can go down. You see assistive technology skills for children who may not be verbal. Okay, we're going to go to the next page and you see what's going on. My granddaughter had an evaluation, and at the end of the 4th grade, we had her medical doctor as well. Very good. So you all are on top of this. This is great. I feel like I'm singing to the choir or preaching to the pew. So here is the preschool evaluation planning form. And as we go down, you see suspected disability. The early, when we can detect issues, stop, let's right there, please. When we can detect issues early, research has shown that early intervention can bring about corrective action and success as children move through school ages. So one of the things you notice with the preschool is adaptive behaviors, and that is functional skills. Can they tie their shoes as they should be able at a certain age? Are they able to do independent toileting? And of course, communication. Are they saying words at the age that they should be? Or are they babbling and it's not very intelligible or understood? Sensory and motor functioning. Pay attention to that. I have meltdowns and outbursts with my peers when I'm interacting with them. We'll keep going. There are a lot of pages that I really want to get through, so I want to highlight these, and so you all can see these. And it appears that you are familiar with these forms. Let's go through the evaluation team report. Here again, this is where the teachers and evaluation methods. The teacher should be conducting observations and keeping running notes. They can talk to the children. There are scientific research-based interventions that they can apply in the classroom, such as highlighting material. Did you try to do that? Did you give them overlays? And how is that working? Document that. And of course, there are norm-reference testing, your state and curriculum-based assessments. Those are the tests that the students get. They're always getting 2 out of 10. Why are they getting 2 out of 10? Well, it seems to me that they can't do the subject-verb agreement. Is that because of poor instruction, or is that because this child is not able to make the connection of cause and effect? All right, so, and it's obvious that the educators are going to write down the results and the implications for the instruction. And why all of this is important, because it bleeds over into the IEP, the team summary. So what did you, the caregiver, and everybody come up with? This is the initial evaluation. And what was the reason for the evaluation? Janiqua was not performing at grade level per her peers, was receiving low grades. And then, of course, the assessments show that when she was assessed by the psychologist, using the WIS, and I don't know if you guys have WIS or Woodcock-Johnson, it showed that her baseline was below average in this, and there was a discrepancy, that I'm saying. And then, of course, the medical information, the doctor provided information that Auditory issues do prevail because the testing shows that the child is hearing at less than 10 hertz and 10 decibels. Now, you all know that I'm speaking hypothetically. Let me say this. I don't have a case in front of me. All right, let's keep going. So when I said that specific learning documentation is required, specifically for this, this is a state requirement. We want to make sure that research-based interventions are included in the child's IEP if there's an issue with reading. And of course, the evaluation that's been conducted is going to tell us this. These are the areas, okay, there. Well, these are exclusionary factors. The evaluation is determined that its finding is not. And so that means that these are not the issues for specific learning disabilities. So we're focusing on specific learning disabilities. And there was something, okay. Yeah, keep going, Katie. There was something I wanted to address there. Okay, so well, we get to this point. Was there a disability or not? And it has to be checked off. Go back up to one more page. One more. Yes, this is key because you might agree or you might disagree that that's a disability, and you have that right. And if you disagree, you have an opportunity to appeal through due process, and you also have the right to get an independent evaluation that the school district is required to review if you disagree. And then, of course, if you do agree that there is a disability, that the child has met the criteria for doing that, then we're going to proceed to down the document, Katie, signatures. And the date of the meeting, the date of the, well, there was no last ETR because this is an initial. We put the referral date down there. Then the evaluation team, everybody's going to sign off. The parent, the special education teacher, the psychologist, and you're going to check in those boxes that you agree or you disagree. Now, you should get a notice, PRO1, that says to you, first and foremost, when I go back to the beginning, when you ask for a consent, it's going to say, hey, the school district proposes to initiate an initial evaluation. But now that we've determined that there is a criteria, we're going to go into the development of an IEP, because the IEP is what's necessary to be able to address the matters that the ETR or the results have shown that this child has met the criteria and what the needs are. And you see the word down there, proposal to change the identification. No, we're not going to do that. We're going to go ahead and develop an IEP, and all of that action is going to be showed a description of the action plan. Now, let's move on past the ETR. We understand that stop right there, procedural safeguards. With all of this, grandson was not speaking at 2 years. I got him into preschool IEP. Also, I'd like to point out, I can't see what you'd like to point out. Can someone help me? Let me see if I can go to the chat.
She'd point out that about transportation, he has always had a bus to pick him up due to his autism. This is required in his IEP.
Yes, that's the support service or related services for him specifically. All children do not get transportation services, but for him, it is in his IEP. The team agreed to it because it is best for him. And I'm sure that there is an aide on the bus who is sensitive to the needs of the children and who makes sure that the transportation it meets the children's needs in the sense that the environment on the bus is really important for children who have such diagnosis. Now, provisional or procedural safeguards. Procedural safeguards are your rights, and they tell you what should be done, what should not be done. Procedural safeguards can be, it's a lot, but I encourage you to read the procedural safeguards because you get them when you first request an evaluation, and you should get it every time at the IEP. It's an opportunity to file a complaint if you need to. It's an opportunity to have an impartial due process hearing. It tells you all of this, what the obligation of the district is. For instance, if there's going to be a manifestation determination, the child already has an IEP, and there is a proposal to maybe give this child a certain number of days of suspension. So now the procedural safeguards are going to tell you that you have a right to a manifestation determination, which is a meeting where it will be determined as to whether or not this child's actions were a manifestation of their disabilities. In other words, they did not necessarily have the capacity to be able to self-regulate or understand cause and effect of what they're doing. So that's important. Now we get down to the parent invitation. They're going to invite you to a meeting. And why are you coming to this meeting? Well, you've already gone to determine that there is a disability, so it's not going to be suspected disability. Now we're going to talk about developing the IEP. And they're going to give you the date, the location, and what mode that this meeting is going to take place. Other people who are going to be in that meeting, they list there. And you can put other as well as the school district can put other. How you choose to respond to this. Yes, I can meet this date and time, or I prefer to reschedule for another time, or I want to change the location of this meeting, or I want to change the type of meeting too, and you can fill all of that in. Now let's move down the line. We talked about the manifestation determination, but I'll just kind of review and, determination of the relationship to the behavior of concern to the student's disability. Did this student's disability have any bearing on their behavior? That's the long and the short and the sweet of the manifestation determination. But just know when you go to a manifestation determination, there should be, you can stop here for a moment, there should be what's called an FBA, a functional behavior assessment, which means that somebody's been tracking that this child seems to have an outburst every time it's time to line up and go outside. How many times does this happen? How long are the outbursts? And for some educators, they say that's a lot, but we need that information before we can get to what's the antecedent? What happens before the behavior? And then what's the consequence of the behavior? And sometimes you as the parent, please share, say, well, in the home environment or when we're out shopping at the grocery store, at the mall, I noticed that when someone comes down the aisle with a basket and they get too close, my child seems to show anxiety. That information is very important because they might be manifesting anxiety in the school setting also too, but maybe if it's because another student puts their chair too close to them. And this information may seem trite, but it's so important for us to pay attention to what is happening with the child. Now we're down at the IEP. This is an initial IEP. We've got the meeting dates and etc. Now, after we complete the IEP, we come back and we do the timelines. It shows that when we completed the ETR, and of course, when's the next ETR? It should be 3 years following this. And then, of course, the effective date is key. It's key. Once you've had the IEP meeting and they sign off and you sign off and you put the start date on there, then that's immediately and effectively when the services should be provided to the children. So, and here again, if you look to the left, my left, of the IEP, when it says the child's going to be 14, that's when you know that a transition plan should be in place. I'll pause. I'm doing a lot of talking. I will pause. Anything else in the chat that I should address?
No, I don't see anything. Does anybody have any issues or questions of Ms. White at this point from what you've heard? This is obviously a very complex process. And I
It's
think
a complex process, but the more you know, the more you grow.
right.
And the more you do these meetings and you become more informed. My goal today is to help families go in with confidence, to be able to use the lingo, and to be able to also, most importantly, provide the best advocacy for the child. And so it sounds like a lot because I'm talking a lot, but actually when you get into the meetings, my encouragement is that read the IEP prior to the meeting. If you already have an IEP, then they should send home a draft prior to the meeting. So that's your opportunity to look at it, to write your questions that you can send in ahead of time, or you can take with you when you go. So here you see all of these boxes, IEP status. We're going to go through those because they have to be checked
Patty,
off. Yes,
excuse me, this is Patty Rotuno.
yes.
I was just wondering, I don't want to break your thought process here, but can you tell me the difference between an IEP and a 504?
Yes.
Which is the stronger of the two, or what is the purpose of that breakdown?
So the IEP is a legal document that binds teachers, school district personnel. And as I said, it can go to court. And an IEP will follow a child through high school. It can be used, I want to say, it can be an instrument of support in college, except for higher ed institutions do not honor IEP, but they will provide the accommodations that are in a 504. In a 504, you're getting accommodations. A child has not been determined to be eligible for a special education services. Let's see if I can give you an example of. Let's see, a child is in the classroom and they need an accommodation of a magnifying glass to be able to see the words more clearly, but they've not been determined to be visually impaired enough to receive visual impairment services, through a special teacher who does visual impairment or et cetera. So if a 504 is honored by the American Disability Act, which can follow through to college or university. Now, also too, when a child goes to a college and universities, they have to have received special education services and IEP in high school in order to get the accommodations in college. Many colleges and universities will provide it, but typically that is the rule of law. So accommodations and modifications are the basis of a 504. Accommodations and modifications are also included in a IEP along with related services such as transportation, such as speech, a language pathologist. You don't get an occupational therapist with a 504. Did that help at all?
Okay, yes.
Okay.
Actually, last year, my granddaughter had, going into 5th grade, we started her with an IEP, and then just this past year, she was in 7th grade, and we applied for a 504. So she actually has two of those things going at the same time. They did not cancel the IEP that was originated out of the elementary school, and then she got transferred, and so we began at the middle school level with the 504. It's all working well. I guess that my question is that the elementary school teacher, the counselor, called us and asked us, did we want to have her reevaluated, because they were the ones that originally determined that she was in need of an IEP. And in discussing it with her, I decided to waive that because it is going to be a continuing thing. She is going to need it at this particular point, but that she's probably going to be reevaluated maybe at the start of high school.
If it's the start of high school, her 3-year review period.
Uh-huh.
Okay. Now, I am not familiar with having an IEP and a 504.
Okay.
My knowledge base is either one or the other. So it sounds like the school district is kind of going over and above, which is a good thing. Accommodations are supposed to be in the and or modification in the IEP.
Okay.
So I'm not sure why there's a separate 504.
Well,
Now,
I think that it was just circumstances that at the at the at the elementary school level, it was at a public school. She then we transferred all the kids because of Ed Choice, transferred them all with scholarships to private Christian schools. And so,
Now
although
you
all
know
of
that
it,
many private and independent school districts, they are not bound by the same requirements to provide special education services. It
yeah,
becomes
they are.
responsibility of the home district to
Yeah, they are
provide that
doing
to.
that anyways. Yeah.
Okay. Let's say,
Um,
yeah, and that is a good thing, but it becomes a responsibility of the home district to provide services to that child in the private school setting.
Other than busing, and they do provide busing, but the rest of it, the public school did reach out to us and asked us if we wanted her to be reevaluated at that point, or did we want to waive it. I chose to waive it because I think it's an ongoing thing. We work at it all the time here at home, and what it amounts to is basically reading comprehension
I
type
would
thing. So
I would just only encourage you to consider the waiving, because what you have done is suspended the supports to her. That and she's starting high school where material becomes more technical, with the science and the social studies. So it sounds like you're very much aware of what her needs are, and you're keeping up with how she has progressed with her IEP goals and whether or not she has mastered those goals. And there are times when children can exit the special education process because they have mastered the goals, which is a good thing. But reading comprehension is something that can be quite tricky
yeah,
because, as they say, from kindergarten to third grade, we learn to read. From third grade on up, we're reading to learn, and the material becomes more technical in high school. So it is a
and
good
it
thing.
affects her math too. Reading
Yes,
comprehension, yes. Mm-hmm.
of course, because now what she's going to be encountering will be reading problems and being able to decode from the reading problems. How might I calculate? How might I code, add whatever operations of math I have to do, whether it's add, subtract, multiply, divide, and those are the four basic functions. But now that you're in high school, those four basic functions get incorporated in formulaic equations and et cetera. And you got to be able to read, the equations to determine where do I start first? Is it, do I find what the variable is and et cetera? And I won't, belabor that. So I would encourage you to continually ask her, how does she feel that she's doing? Stay in contact and communication as it seems that you are doing with the teachers.
Yes.
High school is a different animal than middle school, which is a
Yeah, it
different
is
animal
going
than elementary. So yes.
because
Any other,
because it is
Brenda? I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, because it is a private school, she will not go into high school until next year. But at some point here, that paperwork is going to follow her. And um, and so the part that I waived was a retesting.
Uh,
They have continued the services to us.
okay. Okay.
But
No.
I just felt that it was unnecessary for her to take the time out to do that, because what is working is that she actually ended up with 6 A's on her final report card. And so it is working for her. The support that she gets from school, as well as working here at home, it is working for her. But she doesn't have behavioral problems or anything like that we need to deal with. She is a social person, but that's about it.
Well, you have the option. You could waive if you so choose, but you have the option of not conducting a full scale assessment or testing, and to have a records review done so that there was continuity in her plan and a
Okay.
records review, because you want to have those foundational baseline results and information as she, particularly since she's transitioning to high school. You could, you said, no, we don't want to have all of these battery of tests done again. I would like for the school district to just do a records review, and then they would record what you have just said. Ms.
Great.
Dewberry has her hand up. Ms. Dewberry?
That wasn't me.
Okay, your hand is, maybe it's my computer. Okay, I'm going to move on down. Oh, other information. Other information is important. If you have other information, you might want to put down here the child is being administered medication, maybe asthma medication, or the child's on vitamin supplements. That's important. Or the child is in foster care, or etc. But other information, please do not, dismiss that, because that's pertinent information to knowing this child and being able to develop a successful plan. All righty. So, and then of course, if an IEP has already been done, you can go back and amend an IEP as often as you like. You can, as a parent, you can convene a meeting to say, hey, I would like to have some amendment to the goals, or et cetera. All right, special instructional factors. Here again, you see that, does the child have limited English proficiency? That is really important for a number of our students that are newcomers into our country. Does the child have behavior which impedes his or her learning? That's very critical, because if that is the case, then if its determination is based on behavior, then that child should be receiving therapeutic services also. And of course, if you already, have an IEP or whatever, you want extended school year services, you would check that. Sometimes districts are hesitant to provide resources because resources are limited, but that should not preclude what's in the IEP for the child's need. Post-secondary transition training, where do we want, what do we want for this child beyond high school? We can keep moving. That was the transition activity. I'll go back to that a little bit. Okay, so now we're into, well, wait a minute. Okay, we missed something. There was a sheet that was really important here. And it should be talking about present levels of performance, which is really key. And it should be the planning form, which is where we talk about the interest of the child and what the parents want for the child. Forms may have gotten out of order a little bit. Katie, we'll go on through and make sure that's there. But I do want to say that this IEP's future planning, that's what I'm looking for. Future planning, this is important. Talk to the child, even if the child is in kindergarten. What do you want to be when you grow up? The child is in middle school. What are some interests that you're seeing that the child is inclined to? They like math. They like playing with bugs. They like science. They like history facts. That's important because we start with the strengths. The child is able to write poetry. The child can do two-digit math in 2 to 3 minutes. That's really important, and don't lose sight of that. And then what do you and that child want? My child wants to be an anthropologist. So then that IEP should lead into the development of the acquisition of skills that will help with that. My child wants to be an MET. So then we want to make sure when they get to be 14 that they're exposed to what does an MET does. Is there an opportunity for internship to be able to realize that future plan or that future desire? And do recognize too, every year, there's an annual review. It may change. So now we have an eclectic person who needs to have some experiences in many things to determine what they feel that they are good at and were most likely to do. All right, so we can keep going. I missed that and I wanted to be able to highlight that. So, and of course, the transition plan is going to be in place if the child is 14 and above, because the goal is preparing that child beyond high school to be able to live as independently as possible. Individual, okay, all right, so I think we got down to goals, writing the goals. Measurable goals. Goals should be measurable. And so first of all, you got a number. If this is the first goal, the second goal, that's important. What area is it in? Reading, speech, math, behavior, etc. What is going to be written? Let's just say it's behavioral. Um, Mary will Mary will express. Mary will raise her hands 3 out of 5 times in a 30-minute class period by May 31st, 2025. Okay, so how is that going to be measured? Is it going to be anecdotal records? It can. Can it be running records? It can. Can it be a checklist? How many times did Mary do that? Did she reach that goal? Okay, so we know that second quarter, because you're going to get a report on this goal every time a report card goes out. Wow, Mary has achieved that. So when you can either amend that goal or at the IEP, well, let's bump that up a little bit and say she's going to do it 5 out of 5 times. Let's keep going. So I've given you the goal, and I kind of gave you the objective too, with the goal. So, but the goal is basically, by whatever time the school year. Description of specially designed services. What will she get? She's going to get at the beginning of this IEP and ending at the school year, 30 minutes of regulation, education and regulation. When do you raise your hand? When do you blurt out? Where do you do that in the setting? I'm going to give her some visual aids, some charts, a video, a book on when it's now time to speak in school. How do I get my peers' attention? Related services. Will she have a para to work with her? Will she get a pullout? Hopefully she won't get a pullout for that, but just for instance. And then is there any assistive technology? And assistive technology can be very, very simple, or it can be complex. Let's just say every time Mary speaks out without raising her hand, assistive technology, there's a red button on her desk that will highlight. That's an example of assistive technology. And this is it could be very, very complex. So also too, there will be no need for modification, because the modification would means that she would probably do less work than her other peers. She might have a highlighter or etc. So there's no need for that. Support for school personnel, it's going to be the teacher who's going to work with her and the intervention specialist. There's no need for her to have support medical services. Does she need transportation? Well, let's consider that. Is she having issues to and from school on a regular bus? So would she need to have a bus that has an aid on it and that is providing some sort of regulatory assistance through guidance, through rules, through redirection on the bus? These are questions as a parent that you can certainly ask and look into. So let's keep going. We're going to get through this IEP. So now, non-academic and extracurricular activities. Of course, we want children to, the goal is for them to be in general education to the extent possible. Yes, we want them to participate in extracurricular activities. Yes, we want them to be able to attend assemblies and what have you. Now, is there need for support? Then you may have to say, well, because of the loudness in the assembly, we'd like to have a one-to-one para, a person with them doing the assemblies. So now, did we consider in this IEP the strengths of the child? We did, because we put it in the future planning. And then we also, in the IEP, we took the baseline information from the ETR and we put it over in the IEP when there's a description up there first about, how it's called present level of performance, PLOP. Maybe you've heard of PLOP with the IEPs. And so the child is performing at second grade level in the area of math. The child can calculate up to number 10. That's how they're performing. Now, what does the ETR shows? The ETR shows that the child is not performing at grade level, as evidenced by, put the scores in there, the baseline information from the ETR. Put what test was used. Was it the WIS? Was it the Woodcock-Johnson? And then, of course, did we consider the initial and most recent evaluation? Yes, I just referenced that. As appropriate, the results of performance on any state, yes, the child is going to take the district test. If the child needs accommodations for the test, such as extended time or a day and a half, they should be getting those same accommodations during their regular class period in order for them to be eligible to receive it on district test. The academic development and functional, yes, we, and so regarding the third grade guarantee, is the child on track for reading? Yes or no? If not, then no, don't administer that test unless you give an alternate assessment. But be careful with alternate assessments too, because with alternate assessments, they don't necessarily measure what's in the general curriculum. So you don't want the child to be lagging behind. Does the child attend the school that they would attend if they were not disabled? Generally, yes. And if no, you got to say, well, no, they're in a special school because of circumstances that mitigate them not being in a general education school or a typical school. And so we'll continue down. You can see the obvious with preschools and what have you. And we talked about the statewide testing. You're going to give your wishes for this. And if there's a cognitive eligibility, you might want to consider an Ohio alternate assessment to make sure that the child is being tested per their capacity and in an area that they're being instructed on. Then here you're going to list if they're going to get assessments on all of these subjects, and it depends upon what test is being administered at what grade level. For instance, social studies is not tested, it's not a state test at all grade levels, nor is science. Now the district test might be what the school's requiring, such as, they used to say they don't do the Iowa test anymore. There's another district test that everybody, MAP, it may be a MAP test, a measurement of assessment progress. Some districts have certain names and certain levels, and I'm pretty sure private schools do also. And then of course I talked about the state test. Exemptions. Will the child be exempted from third grade? You can say, yes, I want that to be applicable, but you have to give a rationale. Is it because of a cognitive disability? And that means that there is a limit or a ceiling in terms of mental capacity to be able to go beyond a certain level. But we're going to always assume competence, and we're going to help the child to reach their potential. At one point in time, you all remember that children who were diagnosed with Down syndrome were kind of placed in institutions or put away. And now we see people who are actors and actresses who have been born with Down syndrome and diagnosed with such. So that shows that we have progressed. We progressed in this country and in this world, and realizing that people have value. All people have value. And let's help people to be able to demonstrate and actualize their values. Let's go down, graduation test, if it's at that age. And of course, some districts do have the, they have the test that they take end of the year test for graduating. So now in this meeting, how did we have this meeting? Was it by telephone or was it video conference? If it's face-to-face, it's a good thing because it gives you an opportunity to share data and information, which might be sometimes challenging in a telephone conference or in a video, unless you have sent this information in prior to the meeting. Who was there at the meeting? This is very important. Unless you have given a written recusal for somebody, the district by law is required to have the required people to sign off. It can be additional people, such as your related services people, your speech and language person, your OT. And let me share something too that OTs are now beginning to realize and move into. Occupational therapist is more than just physical impairments or adaptive skill. Occupational therapists are also realizing that emotions or emotional challenges play a part in that, and that children need things such as the wobbly cushion to be able to help them to sit still. Children need pencil grips to help them from getting frustrated and having outbursts. I just want to share that with you as we're moving. So the people who are not in attendance, the ones that you gave the permission not to be in attendance. So now we have the signatures. I'm going to give consent for all of this to begin. When are we going to come back again to review this? It's going to be annually. We didn't talk about least restrictive environment. I think we kind of got over that. In this IEP, the team is going to determine where this child should be receiving the majority of their education. We want to make sure that the child is not removed from the general education classroom no more than necessary. It may be sometimes, depending upon what the team determines, a child can be in a self-contained classroom, and that is in his best interest. There is a continuum of least restrictive environment, and it goes from hospitalization. Residential is the most restricted. I worked in a residential treatment center. It was a lockdown residential treatment center, and I'm very thankful that I was able to positively affect the mindset of the staffing there to be able to get the children out and to be able to get them into the community. And my premise behind that was, how were they ever going to practice the strategies that they were learning and experience the ability to learn how to cope? So, we would get them outside and then take them on outings, some small outings, one-to-one, to a McDonald's or a restaurant, take them in groups to the library, and take them to big, like the Schuster Center or what have you, to a big play or what have you. That was really important to me because I saw too many children that were in lockdown residential treatment centers that would be there for about 6 months. Then when it was time to exit and go to a regular school, of course, it was very difficult for them to navigate that. So we want to make sure that we pay attention to the least restrictive environment. Can that child remain in the general classroom and have support, or go to a resource room and have support? Self-contained is, of course, more restricted. And then, of course, there is the day treatment plan where some children go to. It's not a lockdown facility where they live, but it is a facility. Now, children with visual impairments, you'll see that, if that's the diagnosis, what the accommodation should be. And there is a school that is on the outskirts of Cincinnati for our children who parents prefer that they remain in the facility and receive care and instruction. Let's go on down. I already talked about the manifestation determination, when there's a need for that, has to do with if there's a proposal to suspend a child for 10 days or more. And I talked about the functional behavior assessment that needs to be done. We just don't want to say the child has a behavior problem. They don't know how to act. Well, why don't they know how to act? What causes them not to know how to act? When do they not know how to act? How often do they not know how to act? And this sounds like a lot, but one of the things that I share is really important is that a relationship is developed with the school districts. Sometimes your relationship is met with opposition and hostility. I'm encouraging families to push past that. In many instances, you're going to know more than sometimes the regular teacher or even the intervention specialist because they may be a long-term sub. Now, it is important for the school district to provide training to all personnel, but the reality of it is, depending upon what's happening, teacher shortages, limited resources in the school, the facts remain that there are challenges. And that's why it's important to have a positive relationship. Collaboration is key. Let them know that the child is in the center of our interest, and together we can come together to be able to support this child. And in some instances, if you have some assistive technology or support that you can provide to the school, such as a pencil grip or what have you, most school districts are going to be able to supply the baseline or what's minimal for a child. But maybe you might want your child to have a light on their desk, and you can say, well, I'm willing to provide that. The behavior intervention plan, if their child has been diagnosed to have or determined eligible based on behavior, they should have a BIP. A BIP is the behavior intervention plan, which talks about the strategies and the outcomes, and it should not be something that's tacked along to the IEP and never ever reviewed. It should be a living document. We talked about the transition plan a little bit, but for legally in the transition plan, make sure that it is addressed how this child will be able to live, how this child will have independent care, how this child will function in leisure recreational areas, what type of work this child will be able to do, how will it be provided for, how will this child know what they're able to do, what kind of career and employment exploration information is being provided. And then, of course, progress monitoring. When the children, generally most districts send records of the child's progress toward their IEP goals along with the report card. Make sure you're looking at those and that you are giving attention to them. Now, I have said a lot, and I'm going to stop here. I know we're supposed to go to 12:30, but this is a lot, and I understand a lot to comprehend. Some people have some experiences, so they understand the relevancy of it, and there may be some people who are new to this. So I'm going to just go ahead and take some questions, and just we'll talk from there for the remainder of the time that it is determined that we're going to be on here. And you can continue to look at the forms. So I'll take questions now. Marcia has her hand up, I think, unless it's my computer. No, that wasn't Marcia. Any questions for me? Was
Ms.
this
White,
overwhelming?
uh,
Yes.
I mean, I think it looks like it's overwhelming, but I think the way you've presented it and the way you've walked through this, if the caregivers are able to hopefully get these forms ahead of, are they able to get the forms ahead of time? Is that
They can request
required?
them.
Okay. I think the key to it is that what you've indicated, that caregivers are empowered because they know the child best, all right? They know the child better than the school personnel on a day-to-day basis. And I think that gives them an empowerment that they take to the table with them. Even though you have a set of professionals sitting across from you, you are the person that knows the child best and it can represent that child's needs. And I think that's come across in your presentation. I think that is a very powerful message. One of the other organizations that we've had present in the past that might be helpful for the group, and I know quite a few of them have had to drop off, is the Ohio Coalition for the Education of Children with Disabilities. And we have the presentation that they've provided to our group on our online, and they can go to those presentations and see how that organization can be supportive of them in this process of IEPs and meetings with schools. If they just don't feel comfortable going without some kind of support. But I think what you've done is made it a process that is something that caregivers are very well equipped to deal with. It looks overwhelming, but I think you've walked through it and given them the attitude that they can do this as a representative of the child.
And also too, there is a video that's there. You can go to yourspecialeducationrights.com, yourspecialeducationrights.com. There are a series of videos that you can go back to, and they walk through in a simple fashion what your rights are, how to be able to advocate. The goal is to be able to strengthen your advocacy, to ensure that success is attained for the children. Um, and there is a book called IEP Guide for All. It's a small book, an easy read, and it breaks it down so that you're not getting like today's presentation all in a lump. It's important for us to realize too that advocacy is important. If at any time a parent does not feel comfortable, there are advocates around the state, and you can contact your special education resource center or your educational services center and ask, is there an advocate in my area? And then contact that advocate and say, I just need some support going in here. I need someone to help me to make sure that I'm understanding what is you know what is and what isn't.
Well, yeah, you've provided a wealth of information for caregivers in this situation, either already in it or possibly going into it. These resources will be posted to our website in addition to some that are already out there. We always encourage families to go to our resource section and look at previous presentations, because we do have other presentations that have dealt with educational issues. Very appreciative of your time, Ms. White, and your expertise and professional knowledge. And I think that everybody that participated today seemed to be very interested in taking it in. So I know Miss get her name correct. I don't want to mispronounce it. She had to leave. Miss Rotano had to leave, but she's going to be the caregiver that has been selected for the $50 gift card. And I will contact her after the meeting and let her know that and get her information. But I believe she's a newer participant, so we're glad to have her, as well as everybody else that was on the in the meeting. Brenda, do you have anything else that you want to provide? Maybe some update on our September 9th event that's coming up?
I don't have the September information in front of me, but I'm sure that we can get it out to everyone. It will take the place of our regular legislative initiative that we have at the state every year. We're having a symposium that will feature 3 representatives, one from uh, the state of Ohio, and then an educational person and a advocate. But more details will be forthcoming. And I'd like to thank Ms. White also for her very informative and thorough presentation. The IEP process can be very overwhelming and very daunting, but if you go unprepared, you can come out with a win-win situation. The key is to be prepared and to ask questions on things that you don't understand. You have that right.
Thank you, everybody, for staying with the presentation. And just to a reminder, we won't have a presentation in July. That's our vacation months. So everybody that's planning, can they won't miss anything. And we'll resume in August with a presentation on security issues around people being scammed. And then in September, September 9th will be our kinship symposium online. So that information will be coming out, and everybody will get that. So we are aware of what's going to be happening then. Thank you again, Ms. White.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
Everybody take care. Have a good day. Thank you.
Well.